Hey again, guys. Do you know what I like to do when I'm in deep thought? I like to look at some baseball cards. All right, it's Saturday morning, drinking some coffee, and I was listening to Stofe and Bob Lewis, and it sparked some thinking. I had kind of an epiphany. And it sparked the question for me of, will modern day players ever live up to the hobby hype of the legends? And for me, it's mostly a no. And let me tell you why I think that. The allure of the greats is that we never got to see them play. We have stories handed down. Maybe some of our grandfathers got to watch Babe Ruth. Maybe some of our fathers got to watch Mickey Mantle. In the old days, there weren't a lot of televised games. And a lot of what you listened to was on the radio. And we don't have a lot of film on these old guys. So we go by stories that were handed down. We know about Babe Ruth pointing and calling his shot. And we hear about Mickey Mantle's home runs in the World Series. And, back then, you might have got to watch the World Series or an All-Star game, but you didn't get to watch games on a regular basis. My dad always tells me all the time when I ask him about watching these players, he's like, you have to understand, they weren't always on TV back then. So when somebody got to watch Reggie Jackson in the 1971 All-Star game hit a blast at Detroit Stadium up on the roof, that's what you knew about Reggie Jackson. You didn't see his failures. You didn't see all the times he struck out. We don't see the failures of the legends. We only see the goodness. We didn't see Babe Ruth have bad games. We got to watch how great Ken Griffey Jr. was. But we also got to watch when he struggled and when he was hurt and after his injuries. We didn't really get to see Mickey Mantle after his injuries or before his injuries. None of us got to watch him play. Most of us didn't get to watch him play. So we didn't see the bad games. We don't have that video, or we don't have that experience. And there's so little footage on these guys. Try to find footage on Roberto Clemente. There's so little footage that you can find, but we have the stories of people who watched him make brilliant catches and that incredible throwing arm. Where everybody always named him, the strongest arm in baseball history. But we didn't get to see it. We didn't get to see, we have a little bit of footage of him hustling around the bases. But he did that for, many, many years that we didn't get to see. So these new guys, we get to see Clayton Kershaw struggle in the postseason. A-Rod, put aside the PED scandal, whatever, was one of the greatest ball players of all time, holds all kind of records, and stats are insane. Again, we got to watch him struggle in the postseason. Unlike Reggie Jackson in 1977, we got to watch him blast a bunch of home runs, but a lot of people might not have watched him during the regular season as much. When I was growing up, I got to watch all the Steeler games because the stadium was sold out. In the old days, it would be blacked out from television if it wasn't a sellout. So I couldn't watch the home Pirate games because they weren't sold out. The generation before me didn't get to watch the home Steeler games because they weren't sold out. When they started winning Super Bowls, they were sold out. So I could watch them. I was blessed that way. But you couldn't always watch these games. And so a lot of these hobby legends, it comes from what you saw in an All-Star game or a World Series, or stories that were handed down. We get to watch these new guys Like Albert Pujols, if you watch the last 10 years of his career compared to the first 10 years, would he be more of a legend if you never got to see him play and you just have the stories and how phenomenal he was those first 10 years? Legends are always bigger than real life. And you heard about Carl Hubble striking out the first 5 guys in an all-star game. That's what you hear about. You hear about those kinds of things. You see Lefty Grove holding up a trophy, or Babe Ruth with a crown on his head. We never got to see Ty Cobb play. We just have his statistics. Rogers Hornsby batting over 400 multiple times. We didn't get to see that. We hear about that. But we never see or hear anything about their bad struggles. If they had any, I don't even know. We don't get to see that. The modern players, we get to see that. As phenomenal as Tom Brady was, and possibly the GOAT, we also got to see him have bad games. We got to see him struggle. And I think Clayton Kershaw is a perfect example. If he played in the 1930s, and you look at his stats and his regular season record, nobody would probably think anything or remember anything about the postseason performances. But when you're watching these guys like struggle in the postseason, don't you think that diminishes a little bit their hobby value? And then conversely, you have other guys who were really good, but they didn't become legend. Their stories didn't get passed down. Maybe they played on bad teams, or maybe they played, in a smaller city. And a lot of people didn't get to see them, but you look at their stats and they look incredible. How much hobby love does Harry Heilman get? I think the guy won 4 batting titles. Maybe 5. I don't know. He was a great player. Cy Williams, I always talk about. 4-time home run champ. One of only 3 players born before 1900 to amass 200 or more home runs. And the others are Rogers Hornsby and Babe Ruth. He's an elite company. And most of you probably never heard of him and probably don't have his cards. And even if you saw his card, wouldn't be willing to pay up for it. So the legends, I think, are always going to be on a pedestal because of the stories, because of the allure. And then with the modern players, I think it's more about the charisma. Somebody that, speaks to you. I'm sure you guys are like this. You have players who are admittedly good players, but you might not be drawn to their cards as much as other players who you really have an affinity for, you really love, even though they might be a little lesser of a player. Because a lot of that is the charisma factor. I think that goes into a lot of Mickey Mantle, a lot of his popularity. There's just some players that stand out for whatever reason. They're like larger than life figures. But throughout history, when you hear about old people in history, you tend to hear the good things. You tend to hear the stories, some of which we don't even know are true. Did Babe Ruth really call that shot? We don't know. But what a great story. So I'm not sure that any modern players will, over time, ever live up to that. Just because we know too much about them. We got to see them play day in and day out. Unlike the old guys that all we have are stories and legends. That's what I had on my mind. Thanks for watching.